Another video in my series on why Orthodox Jewish apologetics are so bad. This is a video from Rabbi Moshe Nu.
So just by the way, in parenthesis, just to point out, which I think we have discussed in the past, it's a very important element of the rationale, if you like, of our faith. How do we know the Torah is true? So the simple answer is because the revelation of God was witnessed by millions and passed down in an uninterrupted chain to this very day.
Okay, so there's a bunch of claims there. So first of all, you need to specify what exactly is the revelation of God that was witnessed. What exactly did the people see and hear? Do we mean that everyone saw some clouds and thought that was God? Do we mean that everyone heard God speaking inside their brains? And where do we go to get their reports of what they experienced? Second, you need to demonstrate that there were actually millions of witnesses, and it's not just a story about there being millions of witnesses. And you need to demonstrate what exactly was passed down generation to generation, exactly which account. And you need to demonstrate that the chain of transmission was uninterrupted. So what evidence do you have for this? I don't think you have any.
It's impossible for an individual to come up with a scenario that millions of people saw this.
No, it's not impossible. It's very easy. In fact, if Rabbi Nu's argument is such a slam dunk case, he just told us exactly how to do it. Here you go. Here's a fact. All of Israel saw the revelation at Sinai. I heard it from my teachers, and they heard it from their teachers, all the way back. Well, I never heard that. Someone probably just invented that along the way. That's impossible. It's impossible for a person to come up with a scenario that millions of people saw this. Well, you're right. That's a slam dunk argument. I'm gonna go make sure everyone else knows too. So that's the problem with an argument like Rabbi Nu's that does not require any external evidence of any kind. If it's just the form of the claim that's supposed to be convincing, then anyone can fabricate a claim in the correct form. And you can't say that, well, no one would be that gullible to believe something just because someone said, well, this kind of claim can never be wrong. That's exactly what Rabbi Nu is saying. In Rabbi Nu's opinion, every Jew throughout history was exactly that gullible, and he wants us to be that gullible too. And you can't say, well, we're not imagining a situation where someone would deliberately try to take advantage of things in that way. What kind of security model is that? That would be like your credit card company telling you that your information is totally secure unless someone deliberately tries to exploit the system, in which case they can easily get everything. But look, that's not how things went down anyway. That's just to show that Rabbi Nu's evidence-free approach is self-defeating. So let's think about some actual, not impossible ways that a tradition of mass revelation could have developed. Here's one. Pick some point in time well after the alleged events of Sinai occurred, maybe 800 BC. Let's say the tradition at this time is that Moses went up Mount Sinai to see God. This is just hypothetical, of course, since Israelite compositions from the early era like Amos and 1st Isaiah don't seem to have any tradition about Sinai or mass revelation at all. Anyway, imagine that Jews at this time do have this tradition about Moses going up the mountain, which is basically the story we have in Exodus 19. Here we go. There was thunder and lightning on the mountain, and God spoke to Moses with the thunder. One day, someone asks, where were the Israelites during all this? The answer is they must have been close by, so obviously they must have heard the thunder and seen the lightning. Thunder and lightning can be seen and heard for dozens of miles. Easy answer, right? That insight can then slowly seep into the tradition, It makes perfect sense and creates no friction at all with the existing story. So, there was thunder and lightning on the mountain, and God spoke to Moses with thunder, and all the Israelites heard the thunder and saw the lightning. Years or maybe decades later, someone else asks, but wasn't God's voice in the thunder? So doesn't that mean that all the Israelites heard God's voice? Well, that makes a lot of sense too. Who could object to this? So, there was thunder and lightning on the mountain, and God spoke to Moses with thunder, and all the Israelites heard the thunder and the voice of God speaking to Moses. So just like that, we go from a tradition of private revelation to a tradition of revelation to millions. It's not impossible, and this is pretty much the way religious traditions evolve by accretion over periods of time. It's not the only way to end up with such a tradition, it's just one of many possibilities. Definitely not impossible. It's totally organic, not imposed, and does not require any subterfuge or deceit on the part of anyone at all. Only good intentions and filling in the blanks, which is what people do all the time. If you think that pious Jews would never fill in the blanks, and that filled in blanks would never achieve widespread credibility, I encourage you to look into Talmud and Midrash. Enough said. Here's another not impossible scenario. A priest or other member of the literate and political class synthesizes a tradition and puts it into writing as a sacred scroll. The tradition is then presented to the illiterate masses as something they had forgotten or neglected in their ignorance and waywardness. This is exactly the scenario in 2 Kings chapter 22, and it was clearly effective according to what we read there. You can probably think of many other scenarios in which a tradition such as the one we have was created. But it's worth noting that the tradition of revelation we have is not even a single discrete tradition. If you're a close reader, you'll notice the following. In the earliest writings, such as Isaiah or Amos, as I mentioned, there seems to be no notion of any special events at Sinai or Horeb, and the insignificance of Sinai is reflected in many other passages that describe Israelite history, such as Numbers 33, Deuteronomy 26, Psalms 136, and others. So it seems that the earliest form of the tradition of revelation was no tradition at all about Sinai or mass revelation. Then in Exodus 20:15, we see all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning, the blare of the horn, and the mountain smoking, and when the people saw it, they fell back and stood at a distance. So basically, the people are said to have witnessed thunder and lightning, horn, and smoke. In Exodus 24:17, now the presence of Yahweh appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. So basically here, they witnessed fire, which they interpreted, or someone else interpreted to them, to be a view of God according to the passage. In Deuteronomy 4:11, you came forward and stood at the foot of the mountain. The mountain was ablaze with flames to the very skies, dark with the densest clouds. So here the people witnessed fire and clouds. Deuteronomy 4:12, Yahweh spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but perceived no shape, nothing but a voice. Now they didn't see God, and the voice part is new. In the Exodus account, we never heard anything about the people actually hearing God's voice. Deuteronomy 4:13, God declared to you the covenant that you were commanded to observe, the 10 Commandments, inscribing them on 2 tablets of stone. This is also new. In Exodus, there was no mention that the Israelites specifically heard the 10 Commandments. And so now we need to establish which version of the 10 Commandments the people transmitted, if indeed this is the right tradition. So we have not one, but a multiplicity of traditions of revelation. And as most scholars believe that an early version of Deuteronomy was in fact the book of the law discovered in 2 Kings, here we can see exactly the scenario I described above. An early tradition has the Israelites witnessing something, fire and smoke, thunder and lightning, and a new tradition is later introduced that the Israelites also heard the word of God. The new tradition is accepted because it has the endorsement of the king, the priests, the authority of the written word, and of the elites who control the written word. The fact that your illiterate farmer father told you something different doesn't really matter at that point. Now, I can't say for certain that the tradition of mass revelation we have developed this way or that way, organically or externally, but what I can say is that it is very much not impossible to develop such a tradition at a date much later than the events it describes.
And then tell it to the next generation, because immediately the second generation gets the document that we saw this. You can't manufacture millions saw this.
I just explained how you can. There need not be any intention to deceive or mislead, although of course that remains a possibility as well.
And therefore no other faiths begin that way. You'll begin with God spoke to me. That's it. Whether it was Muhammad or you know who, or you know who, or you don't know who. So they claim that, well, you don't want to know who. They claim that God revealed themselves to them. They're very charismatic, and they convince a small group, convinces a larger group, and then usually by force and politically.
That doesn't really strike me as an accurate description of Christianity. Jesus was known for his public miracle working, not for private communications with God. And if traditions of publicly witnessed prophetic activity are impossible to fake, as Rabbi Nu says, then I think he will have a really difficult time discounting the testimony of the Gospels. I wonder how he deals with that. Has he read the Christian scriptures? In any case, if the knock against other religions is that it's the word of one person, it's hard to say that Judaism is any different. If you believe that Moses wrote the Bible, then what we have is the word of one person, Moses, nothing more. Moses could write whatever he wanted about what happened, and that becomes the sacred story. It's not an open-source collaborative writing project. What is Rabbi Nu imagining here? So someone comes to Moses to object to the sacred account.
Oh, hey, Moses, you got that Sinai part wrong. That's not how I remember it.
Now, what's Moses going to say?
Oh, yeah, man, sorry about that. I took a couple liberties to spice it up, make it a little more relevant, If it doesn't work for you, I can always change it.
No, what he says is,
I did not write this. God wrote this, and this is what you will teach your children, and this is what your children will teach their children. And if you do not do this, God will scorch your crops, burn your towns, smite your livestock, and hold back the rains until you are forced to eat your own children's flesh out of desperate hunger, so that every minute of every day you will beg for death. Am I being clear?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. It was silly of me to mention it. I'll make sure to teach God's version.
And really, what does tradition say the Israelites heard at Sinai anyway? A few words at most? The Bible contains hundreds of commandments and lots else besides. So in the best-case scenario, if Rabbi Nu's tradition is 100% accurate, the Israelites actually heard what? 1/100th of 1% of the Torah? And all the rest is still just Moses's say-so. I'd say you're still in the same boat as every other religion. Moses could have made it all up.
Mostly by force, or bribery in some way, coercion in some way. They convince a group, and then it becomes a world religion, but it all rests on one person's veracity. And Judaism doesn't.
Yes, it does.
It begins with the testimony of millions.
There is no testimony of millions. There is just the account that we attribute to Moses, and he could write whatever he wanted. Actually, it's pretty clear that Moses is just a character in the book, and some other anonymous people wrote the Bible, so we don't know anything other than the story told by those anonymous authors.
As recorded in the book, and passed down uninterruptedly, so that the second generation gets from their parents, we were there, here.
Yeah, you mentioned that before. That certainly requires demonstration. How do you know it was passed down uninterruptedly? If you believe the account in 2 Kings chapter 22 of the discovery of the scroll of the law, It's clear that traditions were lost for a long period of time. And in any case, it's scarcely believable that the Israelites would have been fastidiously passing down traditions of Yahweh's revelation all the while they were busy worshiping Baal and Asherah and Molech and God knows what other deities, which is what they were doing most of the time as far as we are told by the Bible. The Israelites were not followers of Yahweh, which is why the prophets have to keep telling them they better start following Yahweh. When Rabbi Nu talks about uninterrupted transmission, I don't know what picture of ancient Israelite society he has in mind, but it really doesn't seem compatible with anything we know from the Bible itself.
And like anything, as we pointed out in the past, all of history, we believe in history because people witnessed it. And that's the historical record. But nobody witnessed an event so many at one time like this.
Well, since it didn't happen, I'd have to agree with you. Nobody witnessed an event like this. All we have is a story. It's a nice story, but it's a story, a fictional account.
It's like the one event that has the most and most diverse group of people that witnessed it, that rebelled often against the law, etc., but nobody could say it didn't happen.
Because nobody could say anything. Moses had the only pen and paper. But doesn't the fact that the Israelites couldn't keep faith in Yahweh for even 2 days in a row suggest that what they witnessed was less than impressive? If the creator of the universe appeared and spoke directly to you, would you really need Moses to keep reminding you about who you are supposed to worship? I don't think so. I mean, if you have a high school kid taking algebra and they are failing every quiz and every test, you're going to suspect that they didn't actually go to class, or maybe they slept through class, or maybe there was no class, but something is definitely very wrong about how they are receiving instruction. And if the Israelites cannot keep on task for 5 minutes, I'm thinking that whatever revelation they got was a lot less impressive than we are led to believe.
The record itself, the Torah tells us that this was a tough group. This was not a group that you could just convince of anything you wanted. And so they argued all the time. As we pointed out, Jews argued and criticized. One thing they couldn't say was there was no revelation.
Again, we have no idea what they could or couldn't say, what they wanted to say or didn't want to say. We don't have their accounts. All we can infer is that the revelation, whatever it was not good enough to keep them interested. In summary, the key thing that Rabbi Nu needs to demonstrate is that the account in the Bible of mass revelation is not just a fictional story, and nothing he said in this video goes any distance toward doing that. And this is his proof that the Torah is true. This is the basis that he says we have for everything we are doing as Orthodox Jews. That is some bad apologetic. I am sorry.